our workplace in the global north is not easy. It's been so difficult year after year. I mean, sometimes you just feel like, disoriented, and there's no ally on the ground, absolutely none, no ally on the ground. It's good for us, if we can share our own memories. I mean, this is just
Sure.
sometimes what I do, like I try to document these things like day to day.
No, you really should. I mean, I always feel that that's the only weapon I have. Like my experience, I wrote it. My first article, I wrote an article, decolonizing academia in Ireland, and I wrote about my experiences, my trajectory, my scholarly trajectory from Bangladesh to here, and how I have been marginalized. So I centered that experience, and then I talked about. So that's the writing is the only way I think. My poetic justice. That's how I feel.
But I think
You know.
so. My plan is to like talk about the article you wrote. I mean, I still remember like Jaman areas. I mean, it's such a prolific writer, isn't he?
I mean, he wrote very little, comparing to his strength as a literary strength. He wrote very little. And I'm not a literary person in that sense per se. I read Chilakuta Shepai when I was a student, and that was the most famous one, popular, like, no, not popular, I should say, famous one. And Khwabnama I read, in 2009, and I love that. I liked Khwabnama much more than Chilakuta Shepai. And that's the reason like, it's a kind of very, I should say, kind of miracle that I was invited to talk about Khwabnama in a workshop with this group, that the special issue they plan to do. So they invited me to the workshop, and I was like really surprised that why me? Like, I'm not from literature. I'm not, that's not really my expert area. So I wrote back to Navida that I'm an anthropologist and I'm a feminist. Like, why are you asking me, inviting me? And she replied that that's exactly the perspective we're looking for. And that's how I took the opportunity to express. And it was like, I think I was given an opportunity to write a very different perspective. For me, it's experience. It's a Khwabnama, reading Khwabnama is an experience. And that's one thing. What I wrote about in my paper is that, like, there are loads of analysis about what Khwabnama is. And I can't talk about, because the reason I can't talk about what Khwabnama is that my position on it is different. The way I read it is different. And I wanted to focus on what it does to me rather what it is. And defining something, analyzing something, what it is, I identify that as a definitional analysis that limit or that kind of erase the subjectivity of the reader, the positionality of the reader, if that makes sense. And this was my active choice of not being objective, not to create an objective truth about Khwabnama, about what it is, rather reading it from my positionality. And that's what I call a feminist reading. Because when I'm not saying it what it is, I'm saying you what it does. That's the departure from objective creation of objective truth than a subjective partial truth from where I position myself. So that was my first first relation with that book. And the reason I did it, because it was possible, is because the book itself has that possibility. Because it has that multi-layers of truth, it's very difficult to actually summarize it in one, as a story. And I personally find it I find it's a kind of masculinist way of analysis that says what this book is, defining what it is, because that's also requires a view, it's a God's eye view that detached reader's positionality. So I wanted to put my positionality first with that book in relation. And this is an action I think it's a feminist reading. And so it's possible. And the second thing is what Khwabnama does, not only to its reader as me, to all of its readers, it's because it gives that opportunity of multiple representations, multiple reading, of multiple truth, of different kind of interpretation. It breaks our, it gives us the elements so that we can, if we try to break the binary of thinking, truth versus lie, dream versus awakening, living versus death. So this junction is the book, Akhwabnama Ilyas, gives that opportunity, and I wanted to take that opportunity. And that's where I actually position myself. First of all, I think last time I talked with you, my position thing is it sounds like, if you read my article, you might find that's a very unusual way of writing about a book. And many people will find it that I talk about myself more than the book, and it's about me. It's not like that. It's a relation. I wanted to explore the in-between relation between book and myself, so that I can provide a different way of reading and analyzing literature, which I called an embodied reading, a smelly reading. And that's a feminist action for me. That's a feminist reading for me. It comes from my situated knowledge, from my positionality, and by criticizing the objective analysis of a text, if that makes sense.
I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, it's a bit complex, but it makes sense. So that, does it mean, like, if I get it right, I mean, so when you are reading it for the first time, that was a different experience, and when you're doing it the second time, in a different setting, in a different...
That's the thing. When I first read it, I was a university anthropology. I was a faculty of anthropology. Literature was not my thing. I read it for my pleasure. I didn't read it from an authoritative position that I understand literature. I can talk about literature. I didn't have that authority to analyze the book. I read it for pleasure, and my reading, I was like, my mind was blown away about Kulsum when I first read. And I say, oh my God, this is the first time I found a character, fictional character, that understand the world the way I understand, which by smell. For me, smell, it was my very personal factor. And I never told it in anyone. I told it one or two persons who are very close to me, that I'm like Kulsum. I understand people by smell, with their smell. And I try to write about it. I'm not a poet, but I try to write about it. The smell of a newborn, the the smell, the way actually overwhelm me, connect me. It's not very, you cannot find literature about it. And when I was trying to actually second time, I decided that I will write that when I read that. And I had that same kind of sensation. I had the same kind of embodied feeling. And I thought that I have to write about it. And then I started to read about the literature, the embodied reading, smell, sense, neomaterialism, all these theoretical analysis of literature that I didn't discover before.
Mm.
And I used affect theory in my other works. In my PhD, I read about neomaterialism when I was doing my master's in gender studies. So I know all this theoretical perspective. I read the book Karen Barad and Jen Bennett. They're my favorite. Donna Haraway. They're my favorite perspective. So it was I was fascinated by this neomaterialism, this philosophy. But I wanted to do deep about the literature, because if you think about what neomaterialist feminists are talking about is very material. And literature is discursive, literature is text. So a neo-material analysis of a literature sounds oxymoron, because it's all about cognition. You don't have it, you imagine it, you don't feel it. It's not really, it's cognitive emotion, it's not really feeling on your body. But there is a mind-body, because neuromaterialism actually questioned the mind-body duality. And then I started to think that, okay, so that the way we understand literature is a cognitive exercise. It's also that idea creates the mind-body duality, because then we see that, okay, this cognition doesn't have anything to do with your body, but it does. Because when I feel that heat touching me when there's a really gloomy weather, and I can feel that heat. So that means mind always had the body, and I don't want to do that separation. And that's where I found this embodied reading of a book. Not only like, anthropologists go to a places, they embody, they smell, they see, so their sense, all the senses engage with the field. That's different. But a literary scholar, it's all about thinking. But even in the thinking, it could be embodied. It is embodied thinking. And that's how I find those fascinating literatures that are talking about embodied reading. Mm-hmm. And then I could connect my experience with the literature, and I wrote that piece, which feels like it's a very self-absorbed kind of writing. But I mean, you are giving me the opportunity to explain that why it's not a self-absorbed, rather an embodied reading and smelly reading, and and it's a very gendered, because that's also I explained that among our senses, vision and hearing as an art form is always prioritized. Like the art we make is also visually beautiful, or music we create that you can listen. And you can get an embodied sense with those art. But smell is one of the most ignored sense in this world. And that's also gendered. And that's how I find that, yeah, it's actually resonate with not only me. And later I saw there are many women that talk about weird smell that they like, especially when I started to share about that smell, how I smell resonate with our mind, with our body, with our feeling, how it does, what it does to us. It's not very well discovered. So, and that's I found, I must say, Khwabnama and the opportunity to talk about it for me, open up a completely new venue where I can understand myself, not only myself, but also a very different aspect of literature, of reading a literature or talk about a literature. And that's what I find a feminist decolonial approach could be.
Then at the end, what happens? Like, I mean, what it does to you?
It just gave me, like, suppose when you were just saying that when you feel alone in a situation, that often give you self-doubt. But when you can connect with something, you yourself can connect with something beyond yourself, you started, so your self-doubt get less and reduce. And Khwabnama did that. Kulsum's description, I'm not sure, I don't even know Akhtar Jaman Ilyas know a kind of a character that have that, but finding a character similar that my experience gave me that I am not alone. And that's also, I think, open up. There are other people who have the same kind of sensual smell attachment that, it can create a solidarity. It can create a collective feeling. And when we have, that's the thing that we have. Like when I was growing up, every literature, everything I read, I felt like, I remember once I was reading, we had that reading appreciation course, and one thing I read, I was reading in Prophet Khalil Gibran, and one of the things I find that everything is fascinating. It's a great book, but I didn't feel that it was addressed to me, because it was addressed to a guy, a man. All the thing we read, most of the classical book we read, we are not the target audience. I don't find myself that this book is talking to me. And this gives us, women, the sense of alienation, that we don't belong, we don't exist. We try to, like the way you feel in a white dominated area, that you don't really belong here. That feeling we women feel every day, that we don't belong here. The system is not for us. No one talks to us. We don't represent here. We don't see our experience resonate with the most people. Like most people, I mean dominant people, the dominant description. So that sense of alienation is constant. So when we find some kind of cultural product, a book, a cinema, a song, that we can resonate, we can connect, that we feel that it's talk to us, connect to us, it gives us a kind of sense of belonging.
Like, I mean, one more thing I want to touch this, because you talk about, so that's like, one is like micro level, individual level, and the other one is like macro level. So in terms of partition history, the partition politics, so the partition always kind of story told in a macro level, from the powerful, or like from the big place, like the New Delhi, or like, so that kind of spaces, rather than from the people, from the marginalized groups. So like in my own experience, like I was asked to write a op-ed on the partition, because during the month of August, we always try to, celebrate partition. And what I did, instead of writing the story, the history, the big picture of the history, I actually wrote a very personal story. My family's experience, my father's experience when he was in school, and how that, 1947 happened, and what he was doing that time. And then what does it mean for my father, growing up in Bangladesh? It's not like, so the independence did not happen in 1947. It just carried on. And then, it still carried on. So that personal story also, I thought, is extremely important, because otherwise, then we cannot make the whole story complete.
That's the thing about history, there's a term called history, and we call that history is so much from God's side view, from so much from the big people, big event. But feminist history and subaltern historians and post-colonial, decolonial historians, they criticize that history is everywhere, everything, what happening. It's not only a specific day of one era of, like, suppose what's happening in Bangladesh. It's the end of, so it's not only this 5th of August is not only 5th of August is it's not the only historical event when the regime changed. Every day in last 15 years, the way people lived is part of the history. And that's why Ranajit Guha would say small voices of history. And we always, the history, with a big H, erase those small voices. And I think for post-colonial, decolonial, feminist historiography, subaltern historiography, they have been trying to deconstruct that and to make it history for everyone. It's small voices, it's small experience. Everyone is a multi-layers history. And it doesn't have a one truth. It has a different, many truth. And it's a practice. So I think that's what Akhtar Jaman Ilyas provides. It gives a small voices of history. It's not only make it history from East Bengal's perspective, but also give a small voices of the story. And that's why it also gave me the opportunity to connect with me, to continue in a different way. So I think it's many way, intellectually, theoretically, Akhtar Jaman Ilyas's Khwabnama is not just a partition history book, novel. It's many things because it gives, I was telling, it has that plurality that if you see the issue, all the essays are different interpretation of problem. You don't find any common interpretation. It's very different. And that's his main, I think it's the most important contribution, that you can actually make many stories from it. And it's historiographically, if you look at the historiography, it's a very different kind of historiography with a history of a capital H, with a history where there's, of course, I think I also think about Ilyas's Khwabnama is also from a very male gaze, decidedly male gaze, but he's a male author. But still, I find he's the way, especially for Kulsum, because I have a partiality, it wasn't like the last half of the book. Kulsum wasn't explored enough. It could be explored much more. It has the element. He introduced it, but he didn't really elaborate her character. He didn't really make it essential. So I think that's the part of us. And because when I was reading the second time, I identified that I was kind of disappointed to see that the characters of Kulsum and what's her name, the other character, they are not really elaborated the way I would expect. So I think, okay, so I will talk about Kulsum only because that's the part I need to do. As a feminist, as a post-colonial, a decolonial feminist, that's the part I need to do because he's providing me the opportunity, and the rest of the opportunity, I have to bring that work. So I think it's a very conscious political choice, and I don't really want to divide this macro-micro divide in that sense, because that's how, see, like whenever any kind of feminist issue we talk about and people are talking, oh, this is micro issue, but micro makes macro, all the micro make together a macro, and macro become macro by erasing the micro. So as an anthropologist especially, my focus is always on the micro level of different plural history and to disseminate the structural one truth. And I think it's not a partition history with a capital H. It's a stories of many different subalterns, many different voices that happen to be in the context of partition.
And I think that's good, and that's good for the author as well. That way the things were written, it gives that opportunity for us as like readers, and everyone can interpret the things, even the smells and even the other sensibilities we can interpret in our own way. So that's quite empowering.
I think what any form of art form, any kind of art form, when we try to analyze it and when we try to define it, okay, this art is that art is this novel is that, we limit its possibility to grow. We reduce it. I think we stopped its growth, because for me, any novel, any kind of art form, any creative form needs to grow through its audiences, continue to grow, continue to change through its audiences. And that's a kind of life cycle of that. And that's how something became timeless, because it's continue to interpret it, continue to analyze, continue to. So when you just finish, okay, this is that, then you are actually declaring the death of the novel. And so to keep it alive, Khwabnama, I think any kind of novel, to keep it alive, we need to have that multiple analysis. We need to keep going with multiple analysis, multiple voices, multiple recreation, reproduction. And that's how I talked about Gloria Anzaldúa, that what it does to the reader, it's keeping that novel alive. Maybe next someone would actually connect with my article and the book and then write something very different perspective. And that's how it will be alive and keep going, and you continue to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the problem of I would say it's a very masculinist analysis of objective truth, analysis of art or any kind of form, to define it, to close it down, just to make it declare its death.
So I think this is a good time where we can move to the current situation in Bangladesh. So the way I see it, it's again our position. We are seeing the things what happened last couple of weeks from our own positionality as well. So everyone is seeing it from their own personal vantage point, and it's quite fascinating to see. Everyone is I saw in the social media, everyone is fighting with everyone. And I saw someone is commenting that the teachers are attacked in big universities. Sometimes I see it more philosophical perspective. When you say the teachers are attacked, the people who are attacked, actually, they're attacked not because they're teachers. They're
exactly. Yeah. It's a limiting their identity, and that's why we play identity politics here. So the thing we're talking about before, that multiplicity of events of history, and that's why this moment for Bangladesh is so important, is because we connect with everyone. It's a democratic one through social media. So everyone has voices, and although they are in the bubble, we are living in our own kind of algorithmic bubble in social media, but we have many bubbles. Many bubbles. And another thing is this movement, although the students who initiated that movement for against quota, they were very organized, they were intellectually prepared for the movement to keep going. but it was not the বৈষম্য বিরোধী ছাত্র আন্দোলন, শিক্ষার্থী আন্দোলন, it's not onto them. It's the way the decentralized nature of it, decentralized nature of make it a revolutionary force of most people of Bangladesh. And that's very, very important to keep that so that we don't make that with again another history of capital H and makes few hero of that movement, and that will be another blunder to take the people's history, to erase the people's history from it. So we need to be very, very careful to make that multiplicity of voices, multiplicity of intellect, different centers of thoughts, so it doesn't turn into again that kind of fascist homogenized narrative with a few people's behind. So that's very important for us. And the reason, the way we can deal with it, we can do it, it's not to define the identities. Like minorities are attacked, teachers are attacked, and whenever, even though, like, we saw that when there was a attack in the Hasina regime, attack towards Baul community or Ahmadiyya community, we labeled them as a fundamentalist attack. But if you go deep into that, there was always different stories of their interest of land grabbing, of different interest of money, business were at play. Same thing is happening, because if we categorize the attacked, or the Hindus are attacked, or we just saying that, okay, there's only one category here, the teachers are here. It's not. It's that the power relation they played, they had in the Hasinas, in the fascist regime. That was, I'm not supporting or any kind of encouraging any kind of violence towards the people, which is happening, which is really unfortunate. Still, they are not only one category. It's a power relations what are in play. The people who played the part in their time. So there, and that's also interesting in Khwabnama, that the partition history only talks about that it's about Hindu and Muslims, a religious tension or religious partition. But there are many other interest groups were at play, which actually Akhtar Jaban Ilyas was showing that the farmers, they wanted something, the Jele, they wanted something, so everyone wanted to dream. And that's how religion wasn't only the factor, but it became a religion's factor. The same way, this history, what's happening in Bangladesh at the moment, if we just label it that, okay, only one center is at play, or categorize it and make it a homogenized narrative, it will be very, very dangerous for us. And we need to see that there are so many factors are at play, and especially people, the way we did the identity politics, the way the political leaders used identity politics, labeled different types of identities to support and complement this fascist regime. We need to be very careful not to reproduce the same thing.
The way I see it's just a power relation. The previous power just collapsed. And then this is the consequence of the power collapse. And when power collapsed, and I think the people who oppressed for that time being over the years, they tried to get back to those powers. Now the oppressed coming to the forefront to challenge that power, because now there is no protection for that power. Because it's quite a transitional period. It's still a very delicate situation. if you look at the historical, all those things happened in the world history, from like big thing like, French Revolution to like any other, social movement. And then the people take over. And it shows one good story, at least, that, the people, the unarmed people can actually also can take over from the most powerful people in the world. Like, during the Arab Spring in Tunisia, the guy who was in power for 30 years, Ben Ali. So the same protest happening on the street, and he was saying that, yeah, who cares? And after 3 days, he wanted to tell via TV that, you know what, I want to talk to you guys. Okay, I'm quite happy to talk to you. And then after 3 days, he just fled the country. Because then by the time, within 7 days, there are millions of people on the street.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't really want to compare it with the Arab Spring or anything in a way that its context is so different. But that's the political scientist's work. I know it's probably you would do, but I think what happened is people are so angry, upset, and like we sort of think that nothing will change because we were very hopeless. Like we didn't have any hope. Nothing will happen. All the in 2018, the road safety movement was so violently repressed, and the way it has been repressed, we thought that we cannot actually. We didn't know that what will happen, how this fascist regime will end. But because the mechanism was so strong, the ideological, the legal and extrajudicial measures that she took, Hasina Awami League took, were so strong. And it gave some people who actually applied those mechanisms so much profit they made, so much money they made. So it's the power and the money was so strongly at play that we couldn't see that any change happening. But why it happened? Because this is probably the first time in my knowledge that a protest, a very benign protest, a benign demand of a job quota. It's not really a very violent or very, it's a very simple demand that students were made. And then the Hasina government took such a violent measure to repress it. People, the students, the kids, the way they died and the bravery is like, for us to see the way they were killed, Bangladeshi people, I think they will never forgive that. They will never forgive that horror to visualize through social media of the brutality. I think the rage that all Bangladeshi people, normal people who are not benefited by this government, by this repressive fascist regime, they couldn't tolerate, they couldn't see, because in Liberation War, you only see your closed one. This time we saw in social media, Awami League tried to stop social media, by blacking out, but everyone recorded those things. This is happening in Gaza. All the world, whoever has a little bit of conscience, they know what's going on in genocide. So same thing in Bangladesh, we saw it in video, and we will never forget. We will never, like, it's like the whole diaspora, when there was a blackout, I think this is the nightmare, the horror in my whole living time, like my life. I never experienced that horror and the fear. for my country, for my people.
Mm.
And I think that's what ignited people together. That no, it's like this is the time of this makes that people, they didn't care about their life anymore. When you see the kids are dying with, like, in front of the police brutality, they're unarmed kids, unarmed students are killed by the most horrific way. You cannot. I think that's what ignited and united Bangladeshi people when they are prepared to die. That we will die, but we will be united to see her go. I think that's what it's my opinion, that this is what united people. The brutality, the horror, the killing, it's devastating.
Like, I mean, my own experience in the early 90s, I mean, I've been away from Bangladesh for a long time. Like, during the military regime, during the Ershad, the army general, during that time, I was in Dhaka University and I was involved in those protests. And a couple of my close friends actually got killed as well, shot. And then, we thought when the regime is gone, we thought, things will get better. And then the new kind of, politics came along, like the two parties we are talking about, Bangladesh National Party and Awami League. And over the years, last, like, since 1990s, like up to today, it's a long haul, almost like 30, 40 years. I mean, what I saw, like, as a political scientist, like from my vantage point, I think there is a kind of, the cycle of the same thing. We are doing the same thing again and again. And the party politics actually did not get it, that, this is not the right way to actually run a country, because, at the end, it will always collapse.
Will collapse. I think this is what I was also I was like teenager and that time, 1980, Ishad Birodi movement. And in my experience, I didn't see that much of brutality, and there wasn't social media, there wasn't the way it has been. The police has been killed and armed. The people, like, you cannot believe that in 15 days, 15 to 20 days, more than like thousands people are killed. Can you imagine that it's not a civil war, it's a country, it doesn't have, it's not a colony, it's a normal country, a normal country. They're just killing people the way a civil war or would do. So I think what Hasina tried, I think she used all the measure one could take to keep in the power, everything, but still she couldn't stay. So that's the fact, that's the truth, should be there for every politicians, that you cannot keep like that. She wasn't killed, fortunately. She managed to flee. She's still alive. But it could be worse. She could be killed, so it's a lesson. It's a lesson for all for the world, that you cannot, no government can be as that brutal and then keep it for permanent, for forever. The people will, when they knew, when people do not have the fear of death anymore, no one can stop them. I think that's what happened, that the students who protested, they didn't have any fear of death.
That's the point, isn't it? Where that departure happens, that you
Yeah.
don't care about your life anymore. I mean, so that's the
Mm,
power of the people, the mass. And
mm,
if the mass realize that, that's it, we just cannot take it anymore. We just
mm,
cannot breathe anymore. So whoever is in power, if they don't get it, then there are serious consequences as well. But the
mm.
other thing is like from like moving on, I think first of all, like what you say, that there's serious lessons to be learned from here. Whoever come to power, because that's one thing, like bring, I don't know the right word, because those are like big words like transparency, accountability. I'm not seeing these things in overnight, like next week. Uh, it's a process. It's a process. It's a like statecraft is complicated thing. State has to deal with lots of things, external, internal, all kind of things. It's quite a messy business. So lots of managerial job as well. But I think a couple of things I feel like as a political scientist, some of the things you should not touch, you never touch. Don't corrupt the civil servants. Don't corrupt the police. Don't corrupt the judiciary. So these are really precious things. Because if you do it, then did you see like so that then people will not listen to them. Because these people will not become judge anymore. They are something else.
The way the Hasina regime was, Army League regime was destroyed each and every single institution. The people who are not benefited by those, there are loads of people who benefited by those because they're corrupted. Legal, law informants, and sector economy, of course, education. Every single sector has been polluted, has been destroyed. What those who are not benefited by those who are not didn't get corrupted, what they felt is extreme powerlessness. So we are having the extreme sense of powerlessness that we don't have anything, we don't have any agency, we don't belong here, we are nothing. And especially the way Sheikh Hasina addresses the people in a very insulting way. So we have been insulted. Each and every single power have been taken away. We didn't belong. We didn't mean anything. So what happened? I feel the democracy, the center. You can tell it more better. But the way I feel, the democracy is where everyone, a country or the citizen feel that they belong, they have that do something. This is their country, their people, and they have a little bit of agency to change some things. They have their say in decision, and that's what we are getting it back. Which, of course, every single institution is destroyed, and it will take. I don't know how it will be rebuilt. It's a very difficult job to rebuild. But what I'm seeing is that people hoping to get their power back. So many meetings and seminars are happening. One of my colleagues, Manush Chaudhary, he was saying that it's a GAN burst. It's like Bishforon, Gano Bishforon. It's just like, it's a knowledge burst happening. People are sharing, people are talking, they're dreaming. It's the whole month of August of so many meetings happen, what we want. We are able to say what we want. That's a huge empowerment. And I think that's before change in the society, that we feel that we can say what we want. We have a say in it. That's the foundation of democracy. And I that gives me hope that people started to feel that they belong. Their idea, their opinion has values, and they're talking about it, saying people, and everyone from every corner of the group or every group, they have a very different demand, but people are demanding. And that's the most important thing, that we keep our demand alive. We keep demanding.
I mean, the way I see, whoever regimes next will be, I'm hoping a democratic regime, democratic government. I think at least they should know that, the power has got limit. If you think that, oh, this time the students grew up and then exploded. So if you become a government and if you think that, okay, I will not go after the students because they are serious opposition. But again, the problem is any power has got limit. I mean, how much power is good enough? Like, if you think that students are the problem, then next time there'll be other groups will be the problem. Any oppressed group always had the potential to rise up and take away everything what you have built on it. So I think the fallacy, the myth of power, that power can protect you, that's not true. Historically, that's never been true.
No, it's not. It's not. And it's what we like. I would like to see, and I still have hope that the student leaders who are leading the movement, and like the quota movement, and the people who are in the interim government, I still have my hope, and I hope that most of them at least understand the necessity of decentralization of power. And that's the crucial thing that I think we need to do, the decentralization, so that different institutions have their kind of counterbalance each other. Not one single entity gets the superpower. The moment one single entity gets superpower, the similar history will repeat like that. But to prevent that, we have to have check and balance between different bodies, we need all, like, that's why I encourage different opinion, because I don't like that opinion. Someone said that it's completely different, but I will fight for it, because if we do not have difference in opinion, then one opinion, no matter if it's good or bad, doesn't matter. Even if it's the best opinion, if there's only one and that gets the most powerful, it will be again a fascism. It will turn out to a fascist opinion. So we need to have multiple voices, multiple opinion, multiple parties, and that's the way we can actually counterbalance the power.
And especially in the last almost 50, 60 years,
Yeah.
Since the inception of the country, I mean, we've been struggling to sort this out. Still, we don't know how to sort this out. And I think the more we take time, the more, if the society goes through this kind of trauma every couple of years, and that's not good and that's so unfair to the people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's happening, the repetition of his history, traumatic history, is also the result of this trauma. So we need to heal. We need to heal ourselves. We need to heal every institutions, and otherwise it will be just repeating itself again and again. And no, it's not like, I don't want anyone not to fear for their life anymore. I know that's the one who gave us the freedom from this fascism. I don't want anyone. I want people to love their life, to be able to love their life.
So that's the thing. I always use this word, the celebration of life. The young people, when they sing, when they dance, that's the celebration of life. And we should allow every single person, not like, I just want these people to dance and sing. I want everyone to part of that dance. I think that's the society I always, dream of. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, you take care. Okay.
Thank you. You too. Okay. You too. You too. Okay. It's very important to take care of us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.